listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast where we introduce you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. Before we jump into this episode, we'd like to give special thanks to Pop, peopleofplay.com, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Without them, this podcast would not be possible. Hello, you are listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys and games. I am artist, engineer, and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm Branson Faustini,
our game mechanics wizard from the High Mountain Plateau.
Now, there are lots of podcasts out there that dive into toys and games. Some break down gameplay, some review games, some talk about news, upcoming releases and stuff. But what we want to do is kind of dive into the behind the scenes and talk a little bit about the people who create these things that we all love and enjoy.
Yeah, there's a lot of the questions that I just want to know is like, where do these ideas come from? Was it easy? You know, what were the obstacles we had to overcome? And boy, we have got a treat for you today. I want to welcome our guest, Peggy Brown. So Peggy, thank you for joining us from the illustrious land of cheese in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Sums it up.
Yeah. So Peggy, you know, going through your website and everything, and I've known you for years here now, and it is just a list of toys and games that you've worked on. Either you've developed the rules, game mechanics, you've invented, and going through it's like Qubits, Splickety Lit, Mind Your Marbles, Saphiro, Buzzword, Outburst Jr, Telephone Tag. You've worked on Mad Gabs, McDonald's Happy Meal games. I grew up on those, right?
Yeah.
Macaroni and cheese, Heinz, tomato ketchup, and Jello variety games. Is that even that's a game now? 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon, and just tons of plush and even books. Like, what the heck? You are everywhere.
It's like what did I say? It's a chronic must make sort of a situation. And yeah, you know what else? Over the years, all of these things, they kind of pile up like snowflakes. And you don't really realize, and they're just falling and falling and falling. And in the morning when you wake up, there's this 7-foot drift in front of your door. I don't remember how it got there. But that's kind of how it is. And like over the years, you just get all these different opportunities and different ways to put fingerprints on all these kinds of products. And people don't even know you're working on different aspects of things. But I kind of liken myself to that. Do you know who Paul Sorvino is? He's an actor. Of course, he's not like a famous actor. He's kind of like a half-known kind of guy. But the guy was in every movie you've ever heard of. But he wasn't the headliner, right? So he's done all this wonderful work over these many, many years. He's done all this heavy lifting in Hollywood. He's kind of bolstered all of these movies, and nobody knows who he is. So, no offense to Paul Sorvino, but I kind of feel like I'm sort of that kind of person where I'm touching and I'm working on all these different aspects of all these things, and it's kind of anonymous behind the scenes, and there's not a lot of headliners, but there's a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, well, that's why we do this podcast exactly for that reason. And boy, and whether you're a gamer or like a casual gamer or somebody who's deep into games, the chances of the way you've affected people's lives in play is pretty high. Just because
the other thing is you never get to see that. That's the hardest part is, people are buying these things and they're playing with them, but you really very rarely get to understand exactly what they're doing with them. I got a fan mail thing from a guy who for his whole life, he played this game called Wacky Blasters that I worked on when I was like my first or second year in the business. And he told me about how it was at every family gathering and they played it in his dorm room and he brought it to his like every single thing. And he lost most of the components, but he still speaks so fondly of this game. And I had no idea that it was like central to this person's life. I don't know. It'd be nice to know that once in a while.
You're inspiring world changers through play.
Yeah.
Well, I came across a fun picture, and for those of you that are watching on YouTube, we'll pop this picture up on the screen. But it's you as a kid with all of your toys lined up here on the sidewalk, I'm just curious, what were you like as a kid? Because I know toy and game inventors, the chances are you probably never grew up. I'm just curious, what would it have been like to be your parents?
Oh, well, I'm the child of two school teachers, right? So everything was a learning experience, but it wasn't schooly, but we just learned a lot. My mom was really good at making fun out of, different kinds of experiences that we could learn things from. We actually she called it the Montessori drawer. I remember I was like 3 or 4 and it's like, go pick something from the Montessori drawer. And, you'd pull it out and there'd be like some shoelaces or something in there, something. But I was kind of a curious kid and I was a makey kid. I was always making something. And she did a really good job of fostering that. I always had plenty of things, art supplies and stuff to make things from. And we didn't have very much money, so it was like a lot of cereal boxes to use for cardboard and, the cardboard from the pantyhose packaging and, whatever we could find.
Those
but there was always
the pantyhose came in.
Oh, I made everything out of those pantyhose.
Those were the
big
best.
bag of those.
It wasn't called making then, it was called crafting. Like we were crafters back in those days.
Yeah, I guess so. But there were no craft stores. So you kind of had to make, you kind of had to craft out of whatever you could find. You couldn't, I thought, man, when I was a kid, if there were stores where you could buy craft supplies, my head would have exploded. Because usually you had to go on a quest to find your materials before you could make anything. And now there's all this stuff. You can get it everywhere.
As a kid, did you you were making things all the time? Did you know that you wanted to make toys and games? Was that your calling, or was it something you kind of discovered?
No, we didn't have very many games. And it's funny, I was like them, but I remember, and I can name where and when I was when I played games. Like we would go to my Uncle Larry's house for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and they had Operation, blah, and our neighbor Diane Habercorn, she had Hands Down. I'll never forget. And the kids across the street, the Pogos, they had Mystery Date. Oh, we had like bingo and checkers. We didn't have a whole lot of games. But I always remember where I was when I saw a cool game. Like my mom was at a League of Women Voters meeting and the ladies at their house and they had Kerplunk. I'll never forget it. So I guess they had an impression on me, but I never really thought about it in that way. I never aspired to be a game or toy designer. I was always kind of moved by the artistry and all these things, but I never could articulate that.
So was it an accident you became a toy and game inventor?
Yeah, totally.
How did that happen?
Oh, accident. Yeah, well, I was an art kid, right? So, and I was good at art in high school. And my babysitter across the street, Jimmy Pogorzelski, went to this art school downtown called Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. And he was a few years ahead of me, like probably 4 or 5 years. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go there. And, I didn't really have much direction of like college was a thing, it was like, so I kind of had to figure it out. So I'm like, yeah, I want to go there. So I went to that school. I wanted to be a graphic designer. And then when I got there, I realized there was a thing called industrial design, which was 3-dimensional design. Mm-hmm. And so I got into that. And by the time I graduated, there were a couple options for jobs. And one was at a tractor company designing steering wheels and parts for Case International Harvester tractors. There was another place that had an opening called, I think it was called Regalware, and it was pots and pans and toasters and I don't know, all that kind of stuff. And then there was a company called Western Publishing in Racine, Wisconsin, which is about a half an hour down the shore of Lake Michigan from here. And they had a game department. And out of all that stuff, I probably would have taken the first offer that came along, but that one, it fit and it made sense for me and what I was into. Because most of the people in my class in school were guys. Well, they were all guys, and they were all into motorsports. So one ended up at Buell Motorcycle and ran the design division there. Somewhere at Mercury Marine doing boats and motors, and a bunch of them went to Detroit or did like skidoos and 4-wheelers and all-terrain stuff, and that wasn't my bag, so I landed in the right spot.
Well, the tractor world would have been completely different had Peggy Brown gone into the design of steering wheels. That's for sure.
That is very true. I wonder what it would be like.
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful you ended up in the toy and game space. So being the so you said you were the only female in your class at the time. Is that
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Well, industrial design was kind of burgeoning. It was sort of interesting. Our school was one of our big sponsors was Brooks Stevens, who was really the father of industrial design. He was one of the first industrial designers, and he was sort of around. He was sort of a mentor, and but it was a pretty bro-centric culture. I mean, it was all guys. And, it's like, oh, you're going to run the table saw? Like, well, I have to cut this thing. I don't know how else to do it. So there was a lot of that, which was a little weird. But, it's funny how, I'm generally pretty bright, but it never really dawned on me that it was odd that I was a woman in this, picking this discipline that was really, I was the only one. And that was the same when I got out of school. I was the only female in the games department at Western. And I very often find myself being the only woman in lots of situations, and still. So, yeah, it took me a really long time to just even wake up and realize, oh, girls don't do this. now more girls do this.
they do now, and thank God for it. It's like bringing especially with two daughters, like when they bring these creative ideas and everything, I'm just like, please go change the world.
Yeah, it needs to be fostered, and you need to be welcomed. I can't tell you how hard it's been. I mean, you just don't belong, and so you really have to beat the doors down, and it takes an extra amount of energy that I don't know that everybody really has the fortitude to spend.
So after cutting your teeth at Western, you decided to go out on your own, and if I recall, and start developing games on your own.
I was 23. I thought I had nothing. And I had a buddy, I had a friend who was my roommate in college. And we started a company, and we didn't know what to call it. So we got a big bottle of Lambrusco, and we started going through the thesaurus looking for A words, because we wanted to be the first in the alphabet for when people went through the phone book. So we landed on alley-oop because it was just kind of funny. It was fun, and it meant helping someone, and whatever. So yeah, we started a company. We had $100 and a set of markers. Swear to God, that is all we had. And a mobile. Someone had given me a mobile. I think maybe my brother, so a couple of my friends put money together, and so that was it.
The mobile is pretty essential for a business plan these days. That's usually listed among the assets of a startup when you're looking for funding.
Yeah. We did it. It worked.
So how do you go from, a set of markers and a mobile to getting these gigs? Like what does that look like?
Well, so before that, I had spent 3 years at Western Publishing as a game designer, and that really informed me a number of things. It's first of all, that's an industry. Secondly, I met some people, right? So I kind of understood the rhythm of the business. And our first customer was Western Publishing. So they would hire us back to continue the kind of work that I did while I was there, which really, it got us off the ground, which was great. But there were things that I had learned there, like, and I was new then, so I never got to go to Toy Fair. I didn't get to travel. I was like at entry level. So I'm like, we're gonna go to Toy Fair. So I just started calling up toy company. We want to come to Toy Fair. Can we meet you at Toy Fair? And a few of them said okay, and we just went to New York and started walking around. I mean, it was. But in those days, everything was at the Toy Building over on Fifth Avenue, and you had to have appointments because they were closed showrooms. So you really had to have an appointment on the books. You couldn't just show up and walk around like you can now. But we just kind of made it up as we went along. We had no idea what we were doing.
Were you like pitching stuff?
No, well, we were trying to get art jobs because that's what that's what paid the bills in those days. And we knew that there were inventors, and I had worked with inventors when I was inside at Western, and we had looked at inventors' submissions. But at that point, we were just trying to get any kind of work that we could. And so we did some inventing, but it was sort of a side hustle because we had rent to pay. We got a studio, and we needed to cash checks. But I
That's a
have to
common
say,
thread.
what?
That's a common thread. I hear it's like
Yeah.
behind every game inventor is another job. Like,
Well, right. Yeah, most people still, it's their side hustle, but anyway, if it weren't for a few benevolent people who sort of took us under their wing in the early days. I remember Jeff Conrad, who was at a company in Joliet, Illinois called International Games, which had a little bitty game at the time called Uno. He was really kind and he showed us the ropes. And then when Mattel bought Uno, Jeff kind of went along with Uno to Mattel. And that's how we got our first meeting at Mattel in New York. And we had no idea what we were doing, but he was so great. He was kind and, you learn a lot. And in those days then, like in Toy Fair, he took us out to dinner with Luke Mertens, who used to run Cartamundi, which, anyway, like the four of us would go down to Little Italy and they would buy us dinner and we would just sit and listen to them tell each other, reminisce about toy stories from the good old days. And we learned a lot from just kind of like listening in, and they were so nice.
It's one of those industries. I find that I've gone to a lot of the industry trade shows, from like oil valves to housewares, and really the toy and game industry. You go there and you're done with the show and you go out and go to the pub and you play games with your quote competitors till like 2 a.m. It's that one industry where I feel like everybody's sort of rooting for you.
Yeah, they are. It's very generous. They're very good at sharing and kind of bringing up the next generation. Good people.
Yeah. What about rejection? Like when you're going through this, like how did you something we all deal with is a lot of rejection we're trying to pitch.
There's the journey of, when you first start out pitching to when you finally start to get maybe a little bit of a hang of it, that's I don't know, marked with many, 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 many failures along the way.
Pitfalls, right?
Yeah.
Pitfalls. It's funny. I think I never really thought much about rejection. And I think part of it is from when I was a kid on the playground, there were a lot of bullies. And the way my mom always, I remember coming home from school one day and telling my mom something that happened that day. And she goes, well, just ignore them. And I thought, okay. And so I just did. And that turned out to be kind of a superpower, because as I went along and into my career, if somebody gives you information or says something to you that you don't like or that hurts you or that some way, you just kind of like turn and go the other direction. And I think rejection is kind of the same thing. You can learn things from what people say, but generally speaking, they don't give you any real concrete reasons. I mean, the reasons why you get rejected are, well, it doesn't fit our line, or we're not looking for baby dolls right now, or, they're just sort of real reasons, but it has nothing to do with your value of the thing you showed them. And it certainly has nothing to do with your personal value. So you just take it with a grain of salt and go, okay, well, where else can I look and take that to? So I've never really suffered rejection. I mean, I've been rejected a billion times, but it's just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't hurt that much. It's like, okay. I you know what, I always tell this story to new people. I say, if you got a job at the ballpark, of course it would be the Brewers, selling peanuts stands, and you're walking around up and down the stairs and you're going, peanuts, peanuts. Well, there's lots of people that are going to reject you because for a million reasons. They're not hungry. They spent all their money on beer. They're allergic to peanuts. They'd rather have popcorn. There's a million reasons why they're not going to buy your peanuts. And it's got nothing to do with you. And it has nothing really to do with peanuts. It's not the time. It's not the customer. And that's what this is a lot like. You have to find the person that wants the peanuts. And there's 50,000 of them sitting there. You just have to find the one that's going to buy the peanuts. That's it.
Oh my gosh. So do you have a Peanuts game yet?
Oh, I do. It was called Act Like a Nut. But then they turned it, first it became like a Fancy Nancy. Oh God. It was like a Fancy Nancy action game. And now it's a German game called Quatschkofferpacken. And they turned the peanut into a pineapple, and I don't know why. And it's a pineapple game in German, which I don't understand myself.
Oh my gosh. So you are like crazy creativity for hire, from everything from toys, writing, rules, content, plush. You've seen some stuff. Like you've really kind of gone across the gamut for decades in the industry of play. Like I'm assuming there's been a couple of surprises that have popped up along the way that you just didn't see coming. like do you have any good examples of things that you just like, whoa, that came out of left field?
Well, you know what people don't know? They go to the store and they buy something and they don't really understand what kind of sweat went into that thing. It's a grill, or it's a pair of shoes, or whatever it is. And you just buy it and it's fine, and you take it home and you use it, and you don't understand all the stories that are in it. So, you can pick any product, and anyone will tell you this. You can pick any product and you know exactly where all the mistakes are. I mean, I remember one time working at Western Publishing, they made a coloring book and they had a license with Disney, and it was a Bambi coloring book. And all the art was done and it was going to press, and it turned out Bambi had 5 legs. Nobody noticed. Nobody noticed because it was kind of one of these like MC Escher tricky, like you look at it, you can tell something's wrong. But it's the same with everything you work on, especially when you take it all the way to production. And for years, I worked on not just the invention stuff, but all the development, and then working with factories and producing and bringing in containers of finished goods. So there are stories, like when I worked at Western once, a game didn't sell and they ended up having to grind it all up to use as insulation for the warehouse. Hundreds of thousands of games. When I worked on Pretty Pretty Princess, we had all these you wear these little necklaces and bracelets, and there's a little tiara, and you dress up in all these jewels. And I remember we were trying to get it to market really quickly because we knew it was going to be a solid hit. And the factory, they sort of asked if we wanted this, and they sent us samples of putting this really pretty iridescent coating on the beads. And we're like, oh yeah, this is beautiful. It makes it pretty, but let's test it. So we tested it with the kids. And what we learned was the longer you handled these beads and the more they got on the warmth of your skin, they started to stink, like killer stink. And it turned out that the main component in this coating was skunk urine.
Wait. Time out. So Pretty Pretty Princess jewelry, to make it twinkle and sparkle at the time, they coated it in skunk spray.
Yeah, but it was sure pretty, from afar.
Who comes up with an idea like that? Like, hey, let's see how much this stuff twinkles.
There's a lot of fingers in all of these projects. There's lots of people that do lots of aspects, and the factory had sort of suggested, look, we can make them sparklier than just sort of molded plastic. Let's, put this sparkly coating on. Well, it made it sparkle. It's true. It's all true. It sparkled.
Stinky princess.
This wasn't quite perfect. But that kind of stuff happens all the time. And you're like, no, don't put that on there. We'll take it without sparkle. Forget it. And they're like, oh, too late. We already coated everything. It's on the boat. So, then what do you do?
Like it's on the boat already. Like once it's hit the boat, you're like, okay, I guess we've now got jewelry that doubles as scratch and sniff.
Well, and sometimes you think, oh, okay, it's all done. It's out of the factory. It's on the boat. And then you're like, okay, phew, it's on the boat. But then, like this year, this whole Suez Canal thing, I mean, there's things that can happen on the boat. We've had, containers fall off the boat into the drink. And then, they don't tell you. And up shows in the middle of winter, a frozen popsicle container load of seaweed games where you open the container and it's like, what?
There's like crabs crawling out of the boxes.
Exactly. Well, like if you don't fumigate the pallets, you get tarantulas walking out. There's just so much to know, and there's so many potential hazards along the way. And I don't know. There's a story in every one of these things that you go buy a thing, you just don't know.
it's there's something that's so mysterious to people, like, and they go and they pick something up off the shelf and they think it just magically appears there. The blood, sweat, and tears and skunk spray that go into things.
Well, I can't tell you how many times you go to a cocktail party or something and you meet new people. And first of all, I always try to ask people a lot of questions before they can ask me questions, because as soon as they find out you're a toy maker, that's all they want to talk about. But yeah, there's a million stories like that. And I forgot where I was going with this. What did you just say?
You know, I think it's just like an endless, just the amount of effort that goes into the game.
Well, that's what I know. They always go, oh, I never thought about anybody having to think about that or having to do that. And I'm like, well, where do you think it comes from? And they just look at you like, the store. And I go, well, do you know where your water comes from? It's true that most people cannot answer the source of the water that comes out their faucet. It's just striking to me. So yeah, most people don't think about where things come from.
Everything just is.
Yeah, it's like the
you just go to the store.
I can't support the killing of any animal while they're eating a McDonald's Big Mac.
You just don't think about it.
Wait, that's meat?
Yeah.
That's wild. Unbelievable. It sounds like kind of an endless sea of trials and tribulations for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you've kind of gone from that to staff now.
Yeah. There's the journey there too.
Sure. So my first company, Alley, I had my partner, my business partner. We were young and we staffed up there. I think we had 8 or 9 designers on staff, and we were making toys and games and doing a lot of packaging and graphics and stuff. And then I had that for 8 or 9 years, and then I forget. I stopped for like a year, and then Tim Walsh gave me a call and asked me to come out to Patch, which is now called Play Monster. Mm-hmm. And so I was there with him for a little while, and he left, and then I ran product development there for 6 years, something like that, 7 years. And since then, I've sort of done my own thing, and I was just kind of working on the things I wanted to. But now I've staffed back up. I've got a couple of full-time designers, illustrators, and then we've got like a small contingent of freelancers around that is virtual. But we have a studio, and we just finished out the 3D lab downstairs, and it's kind of fun. It's nice to have a place again. When I was working at home, there was so much stuff here. It was funny. There's, games pile. It's a stuff industry. There's always stuff everywhere, and it piles up. And somebody came over and said, "What's different in your house?" And it was just after I had moved all the work stuff over to the studio. And I said, "Oxygen. That's what's it's all kinds of space now because it's not stacked with everything."
There's definitely that. It's like we've got like 4 game closets at home, and every once in a while you end up with kids over that just want to go dump every game on the floor. And it's like, that's what these offices start to feel like, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. And then you don't know which games are complete because like you rob the dice out of this and you steal the parts out of that. And it kind of becomes like a boneyard of games. Nothing is really all complete. Mm-hmm. I usually, every once in a while, I have a friend of mine who has a pickup truck come and pick up games and take them down to the shelter where kids can play them when they need distraction and help. And because they just pile up, and around here, they're just, it's work product, but they're going to waste.
A lot of fun. We have a lot of fun. We steal pieces. We'll go to the store just to buy a $20, $30 game just for like one of the trinkets out of it.
Yeah.
We go to the store to buy it for the package, and we throw all the guts away.
Here's the box for the right dimensions.
All the time. Yeah. We almost never buy any product for the intended purpose. That's for.
Yeah, game. I'll buy a game to play it, and I'll be looking at it, and I'll go, "Wow, that's a cool piece. That's the next big thing right there."
Yeah, I always said inventors are like, if you hand them a bundle of money with a rubber band on it, they're more interested in the rubber band. But they need the money, so don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Do you have like a favorite area you like to play? Like, when it comes to this stuff, is there a favorite area you like to develop toys and games?
Yeah, like, do you think on top of that, like, how, what energized you to make when you were younger, and then now, having your company and all this, that's it's a big change, a big difference, it's today.
Yeah, I have no answer for that. I've always just sort of been impassioned to make stuff. And I don't know, I just sort of have this, I just try things. I try things that are not necessarily rational. I mean, look at me. I held the stolen base record in JV softball. And I may still, because nobody would think I would try. And all I had to do was try, and then they would flub the throw and I'd be safe every time. And, you just try. And it's the same with parking spots. It's the same with anything. So I think I'm a trier, and it's surprising what you can accomplish when you try. And I think it's not that I'm risk averse, but I don't, that's not the first thing that I think of is what if it fails? I think of, well, what if all your dreams come true? Do you ever think of that? So I don't know. I think I'm a trier, and I was just always creative, and it sort of married well with this business. But I don't know. To me, it's always been the same. It's always like, well, what am I going to make next? I don't know.
Awesome. So does it feel like work to you?
No, the creative part, no, it never feels like work. The work part is the managing a company and the selling and the keeping track of things and all of that. And that dogs me every dang day. I really wish I could find a business manager that could take all that off my shoulders, because then I could make like 1,000 things a day. It would be great. Someday I'll get to that. It's just really hard to like transfer this onto somebody else, because a lot of this business is relationship building, and you can't really substitute somebody else for that.
Yeah,
no, for sure. Is there a certain area that you have the most fun working in now?
Yeah, area of product.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sort of a short attention span person, so I like to go from one thing to the next. So I like the conception part, but I also like to have some criteria. And the way that I sort of work is I think about how product lines should evolve and what makes the most sense and how they can be successful in their evolution. Because a lot of times you learn, and I'm sure you guys have found this, where you show something that's a little bit ahead of its time or way ahead of its time, and that nobody knows what to do with it. Because salespeople in the big machine of retail have to say, it's Pictionary backwards. They need a something that someone can relate to, and then something that's different about it. And that's kind of it, like two things. And if you show them something that's 5 or 6 generations past how they can make those little sort of incremental improvements, people don't really understand how to sell it. They don't know where to put it in the store. They don't know how to market it. So it's kind of, you find yourself working toward these evolutionary steps that you find people will understand. And I don't mean it's just consumers. Consumers are generally ready for the big, important new stuff. But it's the machine of the salespeople and the marketing people and the way retail works and the cycle of the year and all that kind of thing. So it's a little bit puzzling to come up with the thing that fits all these different criteria and satisfies all these different people who have different goals.
We've got all the fun part of the creating, but when you start talking about it's Pictionary backwards, I can't help but think of like the pitch and how important the pitch is in all of this. And I can just picture, Peggy Brown those first shows, schlepping a suitcase full of prototypes, then, and compared to now, I feel like what I know of you, I can't imagine somebody else pitching that thing. Like, how do you handle the pitch now, and how important is that?
Well, as you know from earlier in this conversation, I get off track and I forget what I was talking about. Well, there's a couple of things about that. So one of the upsides and downsides is that we create a ton of stuff. And so it's gotten to the point where there's so much of it that you can't remember what it's called or, certain details about it. And while you're working on something, it's sort of in a nutshell and you can make sure you've covered all the angles. But when it starts to pile up and then you go and start to pitch it, you just can't, somebody will say, well, what happens if that player then moves behind it? And it's like, I don't know. I can't remember that. But I was at the People of Play conference this year, and some new inventor was sort of asking, should we, can we just say this is what we'll do, or do we? And I said, no, you have to figure it out all the way, and you have to present the whole. You can't show anything half baked. You have to show the whole potato baked all the way through. I have been doing this long enough that I can show a half baked potato, and I can say, they know that I can bake it all the way through if they're interested. So when I pitch now, because I have such a volume of things, I just kind of give a top level, here's what it does, here's the hook, here's what's funny about it, here's why it makes sense for your line. And then the details, people can trust that I can hammer those out to make them fit the way it needs to go. Because I can't get mired in the minutia of it anymore. I can't manage it all. I can't remember it, and it takes up too much time away from more.
That makes perfect sense. Like, there's a lot of those games, like, if you go to pitch an idea, and if you can pitch it and they completely understand it and have buy-in in 30 seconds, that means that's something that they can sell.
Yeah.
And if it's like, no, you just have to play, it'll take us 3 hours and like all of this stuff, it's like
it's DOA. And I always say that to my staff. I say, if it takes you extra time to build it, if it takes extra steps to decorate it, if it takes more to make this work, that's exactly how they will manufacture it. It will take extra steps to decorate it. It will take extra steps to make that action happen. And every one of those steps adds time and adds money and adds cost and adds more and makes it harder and harder and harder to sell. And I'm not saying that it's not worth it sometimes, but when you spin in mass market, it's a $20 game, or, you have your sort of realistic parameters. There's just absolutely no point in going beyond that, because it's a failure. And it might be the coolest thing in the whole wide world, but if it costs $99 at retail and it sits next to a bunch of $20 items, it's never going to move. It's a goner.
You mentioned the People of Play, which was ShyTag, the ShyTag event.
Chicago Toying Game, yeah.
I love the format and how that's set up. It was life-changing for me, being able to go through and just every half hour, you're sitting down with another company and you're going through that, trying to find who wants to buy peanuts.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody will. You show it to enough people, generally. Of course, I've got this like big pile of dead things but I will say, yes, People of Play is fantastic. And it is a really good place to get eyeballs on all of the different things you want to show. And a lot of it goes away and it sort of never comes back, but it does come back. You just have to outlast everyone. Once all the people at the companies have retired and changed over a couple times, once all the buyers have gone over to different jobs, it's all new to them. So this year, I've got games out that are doing really well at retail, and I've been sitting on them for 20 years at least.
Wow.
Because it's play, and that doesn't change. So, it's dead. You just kind of have to put it in the cooler for a while. It comes out later and nobody recognizes it. And all of a sudden you reskin it with a new, more relevant title or something. And it's all good again.
So unlike technology, which is not cyclical, play is somewhat cyclical.
Universal constant of play.
Sure. I remember I used to put the copyright date on some of my sales materials, and I was showing something, it was all coloring stuff, and they're like, well, this is old stuff. Look at the dates on this. I'm like, it's crayons. It's not. Crayola's been out for 100 and whatever years. It's, this is a way, these are ways to play with crayons. It's nothing, the year of the idea doesn't. So anyway, I started taking all the years off of everything because play is play.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh. Do you have any advice for young creators kind of entering the industry?
Well, buckle up. You do your homework, I always say. You have to know what's been done. You have to know what's out there. You have to know what companies make. I mean, if you decide you've created some really great scooter and you show it to, well, I'm talking about Crayola, they're going to go, well, we don't do scooters. You have to know who you're talking to, and you have to show them things they want. And if you don't know that, they'll think you're the biggest dingbat, and you're done. You've cooked your own goose. So do your homework. I mean, I used to look at inventor submissions when I was inside other companies, and some guy brought this. It was sort of like a Scrabble kind of a game, but you could put the letters on top of each other. And I'm like, oh, that's really great. Have you ever heard of a game called Upwards? Oh, no. Yeah, well, you should check it out. It's been out for decades. It sells millions of copies. Have
you heard of Google?
Yeah, so now there's Google. In those days, it wasn't like that. But yeah, so you've got to really study. You have to know who you're talking to and what you're talking about. The other advice really is just you can't stop swinging the hammer. If somebody says no, you can't just go back to your hole and cry. You just have to keep trying.
That's good. That's good. One of my favorite things is some of the things you write. And in fact, I've got one of your joke books. I think it's a golden book joke book. It's glorious. But I came across something that I don't know if you'd call it a glossary, a glossaria, but it was called the Pop Dictionary. So People of Play, I came across it, posted there, and it is a glossary of terms that you have given definitions for in the toy and game space.
Yes,
being somewhat of a cynical, creative writer that you are.
Well, I'm a smart aleck, is what I am. I can't just keep my mouth shut.
Well, I've got a couple of terms here, and I'm wondering if you can go ahead and give us these definitions and maybe describe what is this. Okay, so as an example, we've got a term here that is mercy take. What is a mercy take?
Well, okay, so I've been on both sides of the aisle of being the inventor and being the acquisition person inside a company. So I have a unique perspective on why this happens. But a mercy take is when an acquisition person who looks at all the inventor stuff will just say, yeah, we'll take that. And they'll take it, you send it in, and you're over here in the dark thinking, oh, they like it, they're going to make it. It's okay. And really, they only took it because they didn't have the heart to tell you no. And so they're just taking it, and they're going to camp out on it for a month or two, and then they're going to send it back with some lame excuse as to why they didn't take it. So it's kind of like it's like dating, where they want your number and then they never call.
So what about what's in the game inventing space? What's baseball?
Baseball. Well, baseball to me, again, because I've seen so many submissions, but also you see them in the stores. Inventors think they should make a game about baseball, whether it's cards or whether it's rolling dice or whatever it is. It's like, oh, it's just like baseball. You roll the dice and this is a strike and this is a ball and this is a base hit and everything. And I'm always like, well, baseball is already a game. It's extremely popular and it's, makes a lot of money. And it's just, you could leave well enough alone and skip that part because it's a thing.
Go outside for once.
Yeah, go out and play. Right.
What about looky-loo? What's a looky-loo?
A looky-loo is an acquisition person who says they want all this stuff and they're looking and they take they say, send it all in. And they never buy anything ever. I mean, over decades. And I can name names, but I won't do it. They know who they are.
Stop being looky-loos, you game scouts.
Right. We all know who you are. That's why we don't call you anymore.
Ooh, I like this one. Bigger than Barbie. What is bigger than Barbie? Yeah.
Well, it happens occasionally where an inventor has, they've got their pitch together and they're explaining their let's call it a widget. And they're telling you all about just how incredibly big this opportunity is and how much money it's going to make and all of this. And when they tell you that it's bigger than Barbie and I've heard that a number of times, you just know that they have no concept of what they're talking about. They would be better off just keeping silent, because once you say something is going to be bigger than Barbie, in the universe, there's nothing that has that kind of longevity that's made that kind of bucks. That's just, so It's a sign of ignorance, enormous ignorance.
Okay, what about this one? You wrote down the ladies' executive washroom. Where's that?
Yeah, there isn't one.
Good
There
Lord.
are executives that are women. There's none. There might be a couple, but there's a lot of guys in the big chairs in this industry. There's not a lot of women.
Well, congratulations on what you've built, and keep inspiring.
Thank you.
Keep inspiring. Keep going. What's a shut up toy? I like the sound of that.
Well, didn't you ever like take your kid to the grocery store and they're just fussy and all those little things that hang on the sides by the checkout? It's like, oh, here, okay, have this. Shut up. It's like shut up toys are, and it's sort of a term generally used where it's like a cheap thing that'll appease somebody for a moment and then it'll probably break on the way home.
That is glorious.
Or you know what? Another one is cat food, where the parts are so small they automatically get lost or they get sucked up in a vacuum.
It's cat food. It reminds me, my wife had coined one in the house. All the ones that have batteries, and you end up taping over the speaker because they're too loud.
Yes.
She started calling those bath toys. Because once they become a bath toy, they stop making that horrendous noise.
Yeah.
And I've got one more here. What's bring out your dead?
Oh, well, when you're an acquisition person, you don't want people to bring out their dead. I remember we had an inventor come when I was looking at product when I was at Play Monster Patch, who would bring out stuff that smelled like 1974. It really was that old. And like, oh, come on, really? So it's inventors, like I was saying earlier, you never throw ideas away. You put them on a shelf for a while until you find a new opportunity. And oftentimes it's much later when you bring it back out. So we kind of say that bring out your dead, see if you can find a life for this thing, or you can unload it on somebody.
Gosh, it is glorious. I can see why so many companies come to you to write content for their cards and come up with these, just a sea of creative content.
Yeah, we do a lot of writing. It's it's a little bit tricky. There's just straight question and answer stuff, but then there's a lot of really nuanced type of stuff, and not everybody can do it. I've sort of figured that out. I thought it seemed like it would be an easy lift, and I've tried to hire people to help, like if you're writing trivia or something, and there's nuance to it. Like if you're writing just general knowledge trivia, it has to be answerable. You have to have a knowledge level that people need to get things right, or they will hate your game. So you have to do things in a way that makes them feel smart, but makes sure that they, it's easy and hard at the same time, or I don't know. It's a difficult balance to make a game where different ages can play together, or different people with different levels of knowledge in the writing. So the writing has a lot more in it than you can see on the surface.
That is a brilliant insight when it comes to creating content that makes people feel smart, but yet it's simple enough to cross generations, and it's not just pop culture that just one person will know.
Sure. Yeah, well, and that you run out of that really quickly. I remember working on a People magazine game a long time ago, and we were just trying to come up with a list of 1,000 famous people that was going to be used, and I forget how the game played. But once you get past the president, the Pope, and Elvis, there's if you're playing with your grandma or a little kid or whatever, there are not that many people that are famous to everyone and everywhere. And actually, Elvis now isn't even one anymore because it's been so long. And so there really are limits to when you think general knowledge. Oh, everybody knows this, but that's not really true. And things that you may have learned in school if you're older, it's not the same stuff that gets taught in school, and vice versa. So there's a generational component to it, but there's also just like a smarty pants component. Jeopardy is a lot like that. They always put a thing in the question that leads you to the answer that has nothing to do with your knowledge of George VI or some thing that you would never know. And that's kind of what you have to do, is you have to throw that little piece, that nibble in there that gives them the clue to get to where it makes them feel brilliant.
Oh, there's a lot of the successful games that we see that are that are kind of like the funny party games as well. It's kind of equipping people with just enough information to be uniquely funny.
Yeah.
But it's like it was on the card, but it helps bring out that suddenly everybody's a class clown.
Yeah, and the trick about that is to make the funny come out of the players. And I know that's a hard thing to do because not everybody's funny and not everybody's witty and not everybody's quick. And but if the funny is in the cards completely, then once you run through the cards, they're done. You know, you read it the first time, it's funny. The second time, it's like,
That might be one of the magic recipes behind some of the games like Cards Against Humanity and stuff, where they can couple that with something else and it changes the meaning completely, so you get a lot more longevity.
And it has to, otherwise you know, there's nothing the matter with playing a game once. I mean, for $20, it's still a great night of entertainment for a group of people. But really, if you want replayability and you want people to use word of mouth to sell your game, which is really enormous, you want people to talk about your stuff. You want to make sure that they feel like they had a hilarious time and a fun time and that they contributed to that. Otherwise, they're just it's just something to do on an evening and then they never remember it.
This is good stuff. Good stuff. Before we end up wrapping things up here, we're going to go into a couple of hidden roll rapid questions.
Okay.
And Branson here is going to be your surrogate roller.
Okay.
Since you are in Cheeselandia and we are across the country at the moment.
Okay.
One day we will be able to do this in person again. But so on this die, we've got a bunch of different icons, all going to represent just some quick questions. If you can come up with an answer, just top of your head. Otherwise, Branson will probably give you a good buzz.
I always come up with something. Whatever it is, I'll come up with something.
All right, so let's see what kind of questions we get here. We're starting off with the sword, the easiest game for a game fight.
What's a game fight?
Oh my gosh. I think you're the second person that doesn't know what a game fight is. And when you sit down and you're just going to get in an argument over that game.
Oh, that's Monopoly always. Because everybody cheats. And because the cheating is the only thing that makes it fun. now lightning is going to come up. But it's kind of true. I think that's the thing. You got to fight over that. Well, I always say rules are really, Americans don't read rules. Europeans read rules. Americans, the rules come out when there's a fight. So I guess that's what it is. It's when you have to get out the rules and then whatever that thing is.
Yeah, Monopoly is a good choice. My brother would always go get that game from the closet. I'll go get it. And he'd come back and he'd have a $500 bill stuffed in his sock. Like game fights. All right, what's next here? We've got the broken heart. What games do you love to hate?
Oh, I love to hate these deep role-playing games where women are objectified and imprisoned and all of that. I think it's disgusting and I hate them all the way. There's too much of that. It teaches generations how to hate women and it's disgusting.
Well,
that's what I hate.
There's a good call to all game inventors out there. Let's shift that. This is our opportunity.
There's no name one purpose in the whole wide world that's useful to anyone.
Goose egg. 0.
Yeah. 100% agree.
What's next? And final question here is the Crossbones competitive spirit. What game must Peggy Brown win?
You know, I don't get to play that much. I really like the wordy stuff. I like plays on words and weirdo languagey things. But like games that are like on the table, I like Ticket to Ride. I don't know why. It's a nice balance. It's a nice gateway thing. I think it's Ticket to Ride.
Oh, that is a good call. Good call. Well, this has been just fascinating. I love diving into some of the stuff that you've worked on. Gosh, the sea is deep with Peggy Brown when it comes to the amount of experience and what you've what you've done.
Yeah, it just adds up. You just got to stay long enough. That's all.
It's that 7-foot drift of snow in front of the door.
Get a shovel.
Except for you're going to go make that into some crazy snowman. I know it. Where can our listeners and viewers find you, find your service, or find you to hire you to help, or just follow you on social media? Where's the best place?
PeggyBrown.com. Just go to the website. I don't do a lot of social media. I find it, I have enough short attention span. Me on Twitter would just be really ugly. So just go to PeggyBrown.com. You can see, you can, shoot me a note.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. This was fun.
Yeah, let's do this again. And I guess until next time, we'll sit down and play some Ticket to Ride. And because I also want to win, but it's going to get nasty. Game fight.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you like what we're doing, the best way that you can support us is to like, thumbs up, comment, or leave a review and share us with your favorite brains. Follow Hidden Roll Podcast anywhere that podcasts can be found. If you want to see our beautiful faces, all of our content is also available to watch on YouTube. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to appear in our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, let us know on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send us an inquiry at www.hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. That's Hidden Roll, ROLE, podcast.com. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.